Hey Wendy, thank you so much for coming out today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. I've built a garden bed recently. My back has been killing me. I didn't want to bend over and do the gardening anymore.
Like a lot of people. Yeah, that's why they're putting raised garden beds,
you get old and you just go, I can't do this anymore. I need it to be easier.
Yeah.
And so I built this thinking it was going to be easier. But it's ended up costing a lot of money. And I was wondering if you can help me now it's established on how to maintain it as cheaply as possible.
Yeah, so let's have a look at that now.
Excellent.
Yep. So I'm Dr. Wendy Seabrook from Learning from Nature.
I'm Kylie. How are you going? Okay, so when we first set up the garden beds, I bought a mass of soil. This is a special sort of peat soil with had organic matter in it, soil and everything like that. We bought over $600 worth of this stuff to fill those garden beds. So straight away, it was getting very, very expensive.
So it cost a lot of money to establish the gardens. And that's sort of understandable.
Yeah.
But what you're really interested in is how you can reduce the ongoing maintenance costs.
Yeah.
And probably the time as well that you spend doing it.
Exactly. I mean, when I built it, I knew there was going to be costs in building it, but I wasn't expecting it to cost so much to keep it going. So I would really love to know how I can avoid having to pay so much every year or two. Because I feel like for a zucchini I'm paying $20 because, so much work and so much money has gone into keeping the soil what I think is good to grow this stuff.
So you were saying earlier about every 2 years you're putting more of that soil that we looked at earlier on that.
Yeah, because it sinks down, the beds sink down far more than I anticipated.
And that's because, as you said, you've got lots of earthworms, which are an indicator of really how much life is in your soil. And they're busy having a great feast on all that organic matter in that expensive soil that you put in there.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we've got to sort of look at a way of sort of replacing, and that's natural and it's healthy, but we've got to look at a way of replacing all of that organic matter without having to put on a lot of stuff as well.
Yeah.
Because what else did you say you were putting on?
So I would get stuff from everywhere. So I would buy some mushroom compost, I would buy some perlite, I would buy fertiliser, sea salt to put on there as well.
Right.
And
which is a seaweed
seaweed-based mix, just to give it a bit of a boost when the seedlings are in there. Other kind of composts as well. So from time to time I've brought in other soils to top it up. So it just seemed like a constant feeding of these beds for not as much as what I was hoping to get rewarded for my efforts.
And you mentioned earlier about sugarcane mulch.
And sugarcane mulch as well. The amount of bags of sugarcane mulch I've bought over the years is unbelievable. Yeah.
And the interesting thing about that too is if we think about the carbon footprint or the environmental footprint beyond our garden gate with all of this bag stuff that we're bringing in.
Yeah.
It's, from a sort of personal point of view, it's always great. How can we reduce costs? But we can also sort of then look at indirectly what we're doing is we're reducing our environmental footprint, our carbon footprint.
That's right, and all the bags that everything comes in as well, like just goes into landfill. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So I'd love to figure out a way around that, please.
Okay, well, let's go into the garden.
Excellent.
We've got a choice really with any sort of garden. Either we add all the organic matter and the nutrients and we bring it in from outside, or we grow it as much as possible within the areas that we're growing our food. So that reduces the amount of inputs that we have to use. Here, Kylie, you've got these zucchinis, and it's a good example in comparison with the other bed that we looked at with the rocket and the bit of capsicum. Look at the amount of the size of the solar panel, the size of the plant, the amount of plant tissue or plant biomass that we're producing. And obviously you're growing zucchinis, but so you want all of that growing, but there'll be all the dead leaves that you can chop and drop. But what I would say too is in this bed is there other things that you could interplant amongst the zucchini? Is there anything that sort of comes to mind?
I don't know. I'm needing your help with this one.
And maybe things that would grow a little bit taller.
Okay.
Obviously, you've got to think about the light. Depending on where we're growing, we have to think about the amount of sunlight.
Yeah.
But one good way of growing more plant tissue, more plant biomass, is to layer things.
Okay.
And so, you know, capsicums or eggplants above your lettuces, your rocket. Is a good way. The rocket leaves are dying, the chewed up leaves you're going to leave on the bed. But the other thing that's starting to happen is that you're growing plants with different root architectures, different roots. Some of them will be deeper roots, some of them will be clumped roots, and those are themselves, roots are living and dying all of the time, and so they're leaving the organic matter, the organic material in your soil. And of course they're putting out the root exudates, which are the sugars and proteins that plant secrete from their roots to feed the soil microbes.
Yeah.
And so while you're producing stuff, while you're using a bed to actually grow things, I would just look at ways and think about ways of interplanting with a diversity of different things. And they don't all have to be food crops. They could be like you had marigolds, you said before.
Yeah, yeah.
So you could be ones that are you're using to attract beneficial insects, or even to cut as flowers to have in the house. But you can also think about growing things in sequence, or people sometimes call it relay cropping. And so you would plant, say, the fast growing things like the lettuces, and then you'd put the eggplants in or the capsicums in that will come later on. And so you maintain this whole progression of vegetables, of vegetable crops. So it's a bit like, you know, people in the past talked about rotating all the time, rotating their crops. But what you're doing is you're actually rotating it more in sequence.
So does that mean that technically there's just always something growing in there, so you
Yes.
never need to have a bare bed that you have to top up? It's always just regenerating itself?
Yes, and if you do have a bare bed, if you do have that, what's happening is those soil organisms, they're the ones obviously that are running your whole soil, they're the ones that are feeding your soil. I mean, they're getting a great feed, it's great, you know, and when we have a look at the soil in here, it's easy to get my hand down in the soil. Look at this, we've got earthworms.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Big earthworms. Look at the dark colour of the soil there, with all of so that's all the organic matter in the soil. So with all these inputs, the healthy looking worm, with all these inputs, you've built in an artificial way a good soil, and it's supporting lots of life. But if you have no plants living in it, they're going to still keep having a feast.
Yeah.
They're going to still keep eating all that stuff that you've paid a lot of money to put on, and that's why the bed is dropping. You know, in a natural ecosystem, what feeds the soil organisms is the plants. So when we chop and drop in our vegetable gardens, we're mimicking a grazing and browsing animal.
So you've just pointed out one of the big mistakes that I've been making is when the plants are finished, I rip them out.
Right,
And throw them away, because I like the idea of having a nice clean palette to start with.
Yep.
But what I'm doing is I'm taking away all that amazing nutrients that will help the next round.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of that happens because people are so worried about diseases and things.
Yeah.
But part of the reason why we get diseases is because we've got soils that are so dysfunctional in a way.
Yeah.
So growing lots of plants, I mean, this is the sort of the ecological approach to growing food. Growing the plants, us coming in because we haven't got grazing animals, we haven't got browsing animals, so we're chopping and dropping, we're leaving the leaves on the soil, we're leaving as much root mass in the soil, we can use weeds as well. Oh, heaven forbid.
I know.
You know?
I'm always picking out the little weeds I see, because I think, oh, that doesn't look pretty. You know, like we've got this thing in our head of what a good garden's supposed to look like.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're breaking my brain with all of these things and saying, leave the weeds in there.
Yeah. Kylie, look at these weeds here. You know, they're not competing with your eggplants. I mean, the main thing that we have to watch with weeds is the light, is that they're not competing for the light with our vegetables. But you know, I saw a really good example a few years ago in the UK, one of the biggest commercial vegetable producers. I looked at their celery and their lettuce crops, and their management was that when they first put out the vegetables, they would manage the weeds, and huge. You can imagine a commercial say. I mean, any market gardener will tell you that it's one of the biggest expenses they have is weeding. But what this farmers worked out is that after a certain stage, they can leave the weeds in there. And they found that it actually improves the soil, so that the lettuces and the celery are big enough. They've got enough sunlight to grow, and then the weeds come up, but before the weeds get too big, they're harvesting those crops. Let's say you finished growing, and you were saying that you bought some seeds of a green manure seed. So the green manure tends to be something that people grow. It's a mixture of species, grows very fast, and then it's called green manure because they work it into the top part of the soil. The other approach that has come from broadacre cropping environments, where now instead of leaving their soil bare between growing cereal crops, they're now growing a thing called cover crops, and you're starting to see that in the gardening sort of columns and magazines and things. And so that's similar to a green manure crop, but it's growing a whole lot of a diversity of different plants, and who are doing a lot of different things. Some of them are deeper rooted. They're using legumes, and like you've got no peas at the back there, and you're using the fence to climb up there. Maybe you could put some bush beans in here.
Beans, yep.
Yeah. And so, yeah, cover crops. Some of these farmers are using 20 species, mixture of species.
Wow.
And in a way you could say, well, they're companion plants, because I'm choosing ones that attract beneficial insects. I'm choosing ones that are deep rooted to decompact my soil. But in effect, the main thing that they're doing is providing the three things that our soil organisms need. They're providing the leaves, stems above ground, they're providing the root tissues and the root exudates. To feed your soil community, and then they can get on with the job that, you know, I always say this, that we've got this whole team of experts in there, and that we just need to give them the resources to do the job.
You make it sound so easy, Wendy. I would love to do that more now. It just sounds like so much less work than buying hundreds of dollars of soil. Plant more plants. Make them do all the work for us and benefit from it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and reduce our carbon and environmental footprint in the process.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
My pleasure.